Well, another night was ticking by. Things seemed peaceful and well. Wasn't long though. I was awoken by a crazy loud swooshing noise. I had no idea what this could be. When I went and investigated, there were 3 enormous butterflies coming at me. They were as mad as you would believe. And I had no idea whether they were just going to be able to fly right over my walls or whether I'd be able to even lock them out of the base. I also didn't know whether my traps were going to be effective. So there was something to discover with these newfangled creatures here. We didn't have these on Earth. Butterflies were a good thing. I tried to take a shot at one. Of course I missed, it was moving so fast. But it turns out they did fall victim to my traps. Not sure why they didn't just hop right over my wall, but they didn't. The last one nigh on made it inside, but I got the door closed just in time. That huge scary thing was out there bashing on the door, really scaring the crap out of me. And I poked my head out and was able to shoot it dead. At that point, I thought it was going to be a good play. I thought I was going to get some meat from them and it'd be usable. So for the moment, I cooked a meal. Thought about how to go about butchering them things. That was my next move. Butcher one of them up. Upon doing so, all I got was a whole bunch of stinky, gross insect meat, if you believe that. So I set up a little zone outside the base. Decided I'd put the insect meat out there and let the dog and the cougar eat them. So when they'd wake up, they'd get a nice little surprise. My windmill wasn't quite keeping up with my power needs, but I was content to deal with the brownouts for now. After all the butterflies were butchered, I set about remaking my traps that they'd set off. But once again, I'd managed to keep myself safe with just a few simple traps. It might be worth my time to upgrade these to steel, but the wood seems alright. It doesn't actually kill people. It gives me the option, if they're a decent person, to get them back up to health and let them move on. So I spent some time training my cougar and then my dog. And then after that, there was a whole slew of trees that needed chopping and traps that needed building. So I worked on those trees, occasionally bringing the wood back, occasionally taking some time, throw some horseshoes. And it wasn't too bad. It was 1 degree out midday. I spent some time thinking about how best to get another windmill in my zone here. I'd hate to have to expand my outside walls. I figured out a solution that would cost me a little bit of growing area. But what are you gonna do? My next move was to start rebuilding those traps, which I got a few done before I ran out of wood again. Then I put some time into some new power conduit, leading to where my new wind turbine was going to go. I had to clear out a tree to make that happen as well. It was then my good mood just started to fade. But I just went back to feeling average, not so pumped up all the time. Thus far, my animals had steered clear of the insect meat, so I wasn't sure if that plan was going to work or not as I laid down and went to sleep that night. While I slept, an exotic goods trader showed up. And of course, once again, these people had some respect and mostly stayed outside of the base, only occasionally sending someone in. I didn't really have any money to buy anything, but it was nice to browse for a minute. In the end, I gave up. Couldn't barter them down on anything, so I built a trap and I chopped wood. and I built the trap, and I chopped wood. After chopping wood for a little while, I was hungry. I had a meal. I decided I was going to need to get the steel mined out if I was going to build my second wind turbine. So despite the extreme negative 23 degree Fahrenheit temperature, I spent some time mining. It snowed like mad that day. Eventually though, I managed to get through all the mining I needed to build that second turbine. Yeah, I had the components stockpiled, so that was going to be good. I delivered supplies, and then I tried to warm up, relax for a little while, and then I set right to building it, and it went off without a problem. There was still a tree in the way, but it was on my list, and it was making energy right away, so I wasn't terribly concerned with that tree. I was hungry, and Flossie, one of my guests, had sat down to use my only chair, so I ended up having to eat standing up without a table, and that made me rather grumpy. I suppose I'll get over it. Despite the hard snow, I set out, chopped trees a little more, and heard a loud crash off in the distance. Some space chunks fell again. These ships must really be breaking up in the atmosphere, 'cause they sure are dropping a lot of crap down here. I was contemplating that as I went to sleep that night. That's about the same time the trade caravan left, which was fine. They were making a whole ton of noise, tracking dirt around my place anyway. For the most part, I was feeling alright. Next day, I got up early, 3 a.m., did a little bit of tree chopping, ate a meal, and then went straight back to tree chopping. I chopped trees several hours, and then I chopped trees for several hours more. Around about noon, I'd wrapped up, started hauling all that wood in, and that was going to take a while. I decided to spend a little bit of time training my dog, and I had some success for once. The dog and the cougar were indeed eating that insect meat, as were the wild animals. But I didn't really care, at least it didn't go completely to waste. My butterfly encounter. Once again, it was time to throw some more horseshoes. Despite the hard snow, pinched in between my two buildings, it wasn't so terrible. I was feeling alright, but it was time to go hunt something. I was out of supplies, getting close to being out of food, and there were some rams nearby. So that's what I went after. They don't produce as much meat as I'd like, but it certainly could be worse. Once again, as is typical, I shot him, he took off. I chase him, shoot him, he'd take off. You know how it goes. Every time you hunt, he tries to get away from you. But eventually, I brought him down, got him carried back. It was quite a long walk back. I decided to go around the lake, not through it this time. For the most part it was frozen, but there was no chance risking getting wet. That night as I slept, some uranium fell out of the sky right nearby. I guess that's a good thing. I don't have any use for uranium, but it was also at that time 3 more dogs showed up. I was having a real hard time feeding all the animals I already had. And I knew I was going to have to make a real tough decision on this one. So they were running around the base, making a filthy mess. And I decided there was only one way to deal with these huskies. As sad as it was, I was going to have to put them down. Since I was carrying that uranium in, a low buzz started in my ears. And as those huskies were making sweet love, I put 2 of them down, and then I grabbed the 3rd. And after that, I threw him right in the freezer, without too much guilt, really. I didn't ask for them dogs. I didn't really want any more dogs. And they made a fine amount of meat. So I butchered one up, made a bunch of meals, and then I went for a walk, feeling a little bit bad for what I'd done, but realizing I didn't have much of a choice. There's no way I could have been feeding all these extra mouths, plus they're going to start making babies. At that point, I decided to figure out how to make some food that would carry on the road. My simple meals wouldn't last very long, so I had to make something that would last when I got out on the road in the spring. In the meantime, I butchered the other husky, cooked a little bit, and by then it was already time to go to bed for the day. Seems like crazy stuff always befalls me in the nighttime. And once again, true to form, a mad squirrel came at my base. He must have smelled something he wanted. Maybe it was husky meat. I can't really say. But he did run around outside. I just ignored him. And sure enough, he went down on one of my traps. Next morning, as I was cooking a meal, transport pod crashed nearby again. The fella had one creepy mustache. Some decent clothes on him, too. Said he liked to start fires and he hated women. And he was beat up pretty bad. Huffing and puffing. Sounded like he could hardly draw a breath. I thought about what to do about him. But in the end, I decided I had work to do. And as much as his clothes would benefit me, I'd be better off just leaving him alone. I had enough on my conscience for the clothes I'd already stolen, and the people I'd already hurt here. So in the future, I was going to think a lot more. And unless somebody was actively upset or angry with me, I was going to try and be a better person. I did some cleaning, and I set to researching, periodically stopping to eat, do a little cooking. And then some cargo pods came down. It was silk. I'd never experienced this kind of silk before. But I decided it was something I should bring in, and while I was out there, I could get some of them ship chunks ripped apart. I made the long trek through the woods, through the hard snow, and got the silk, got one of them ship chunks disassembled. I was really low on steel at this point, so that got me a little more. I didn't really have much call for steel unless something bad happened. And it was time to go to bed once again. Days seemed to fly by like nobody's business, but my second wind turbine sure did solve the problem I was having with power. The research didn't seem to be progressing terribly fast. I did switch it up and decide, what if I could grow snow beets right now in the winter? That would be amazing. So I decided to head towards figuring out how to grow some snow beets. I also changed my cooking plan. I wasn't going to be cooking every day. I was only going to be cooking when I got low on meals, and then I'd cook all the way up to 10. After researching for a while, it was time to toss some horseshoes around. That clink clink sound was real meditative for me at this point. After that, it was back to the research bench. 3 hours later, I was still sitting there, upset that my room was a mess, even though I hadn't really done anything. So I got up, tied it up, put away that husky fur that was making me sad, and sat back down for some more research. At that point, overall, I was feeling real well. Didn't have many complaints. A little bit of relaxing, meal once in a while, research all day, and around about 11, it was time to go to bed. I got a message in the night. Someone was being chased by a scavenger thrasher, whatever the world that is. I thought it over quite a bit, and I decided to offer her safety. She was an 18-year-old girl, seemed a little lost in the world, so I thought perhaps I could help her out. Teresa was her name. She was being chased by a girl named Bird. Teresa wasn't the best, but she was alright. Bird had a mace. Bird was pretty beat up though. A little older, bad back. Didn't seem like the type that should be chasing after an 18-year-old. So I ran outside with the bow, trying to shake off sleep for the night. At this point it was already 5 a.m. and Teresa slowly made her way up with Bird in, I'm not going to say hot pursuit because she wasn't moving the quickest, but with Bird in some kind of pursuit. I thought about sicking my cougar on her, and in the end I just waited around. Eventually she got close enough. I decided to give her the business. I yelled at her, told her to turn back. She didn't listen. Of course my shot flew wide, being that it was -24 and a hard snow. I probably couldn't have hit the broadside of a barn at that point. So I ducked inside, hoping she'd run down my trap hallway. Once I was inside, she was out of sight and out of mind. I thought she'd figured it out, but it turns out she hadn't. 2 traps later, poor Bird was free of her mortal shell. Once again, my incompetent cooking had got me sick. This was starting to get a little tiring. Maybe I need to put some type of cleaner flooring, cleaner situation going on in my cook room. I'm pretty sure this was due to my own incompetence though. And so I made yet another grave. I buried Bird. Got to rebuilding my traps. It was hard being so sick. It was so cold. But at least the snow had stopped. I did manage to fail in my construction of that second trap. And Teresa hung out for a little while. Turns out she was a heck of a miner. She was a real character of a kid. She even got my trap built for me. It was sure nice to have a second set of hands. She loved building. She loved mining. I did at some point tell her she had to leave, but she seemed happy as a clam hanging out. And while she was working for me, I decided to try and build a snowman, all the while barfing all over myself, all over the ground around me. I persevered though, and there was a little snowman built by yours truly. Teresa decided to sleep in the filth. She came on inside. I told her, Teresa, you can't stay. You're going to have to leave. And she agreed to leave at that point. I sat down for a slow meal, being that I was so sick it was hard to eat. And after that I was off to bed. Little did I know, Teresa had hid out in my storeroom. And she was scared, she was tired. In the middle of the night, someone wanted me to send them some human leather, and I disgustedly told them no. And also a solar flare happened, putting out my power and my heat. In the morning, I discovered Teresa was still there, and I had to get stern with her. She cried, but she did leave me her shirt out of the kindness of her heart. And once again, I was upset at the fact that she had to go. It sure was nice to have somebody else around. But also, once again, I would prefer to be alone. If she hangs out here, something bad's gonna happen. She's just gonna get killed. It's gonna be all my fault. I prefer to be responsible for myself. I'd also prefer to get rid of this little cat of mine and keep this dog. But for now, I think I'm stuck with the bugger. So I researched the better part of the day. In the distance I did hear some clomping and some snorting. And it turns out there was a whole bunch of muffalo hanging out. Given that news, I decided I was going to do some hunting. As those muffalo laid down to go to sleep, I came creeping through the trees. And despite my own slight tiredness, I just cut loose with the bow. As is typical, they would run, I would shoot, they would run, but I stuck with it, hoping they didn't get angry enough to chase after me. These guys could do some real damage to me. My goal was to mix it up, shoot several of them, get them wounded, and let them bleed out over time. I heard a loud explosion back in my home area while I was hunting those buffalo, and I hightailed it back quicker than you'd believe. I could see the smoke rising over the wall. And I got back in there to realize my walls, my power conduit was all on fire. Things were going down here. It was a bit disconcerting. Apparently, my shoddy electric work had caused the fire. And before I went to bed that night, I had to go ahead, build some more power conduit. Apparently, that shock drained the batteries out straight away. Next day, because I did have to go to sleep after that, I checked on the health of them buffalo. 2 of them were darn near dead already. Good day. It was gonna be blue fur and meat for weeks. If my animals didn't eat me out of house and home anyway. So I slept in the next day, got up and had myself a meal, and did a little bit of cleaning as usual before relaxing. I was feeling good, had a big smile, thinking about that buffalo meat. After that, time to fix all the walls that got destroyed. Some fella called offering peace talks, but I passed. I don't have the ability to get out in this weather. 2 of them buffalo had died. And there was an old rotten corpse over there. In fact, I believe that's the person I'd stolen my coat from. I didn't want to get too close to her. The guilt would come back. The sadness. I probably could have saved her. I focused on killing those buffalo instead. Well, one of them ran right around by her dead body, bleeding like a stuck pig the whole time. And he was gonna bleed out eventually anyways. I figured I'd aid him along as he went to sleep though. Down he went. So at that point, I hauled the first of those 4 buffalo back. And I was right happy about it. Had a couple wounds right in his torso there. But eventually I got him dragged back, threw him in the freezer, and it was high time I got to sleep. Despite my extreme hunger level, I still felt bad for banishing Teresa, but it was for her own good. The next day, I spent a whole lot of time hauling buffalo back and forth. There were 3 more dead ones, and a hungry warg over there just looking for food. In between, I'd sit, have a little relaxation, tidy up the place a little bit, but eventually I wanted all these guys hauled in today, so I better stay on top of it. And there were some people passing by, and I just let them be. They seemed better armed than I was, and I had buffalo to haul. We didn't want them to know I was sitting on a mountain of buffalo meat and fur. Who knows what they'd do if they knew that. At that point, someone offered me a little quest. A tech-proof sub-persona core and animals. Neurotrainer mech serum. I could make myself super smart with this. Once again, the problem being, it was too far away to go get. I could forage, perhaps. But it was still really late winter. So I decided to ignore it and butcher up some buffalo. Oh man, did they make a lot of meat. And a fair amount of fur to boot. So I made a bunch of meals. The animals seemed to be smiling at that. And the dog, he smelled that buffalo meat and dove right in face first. It was at that point I decided I wasn't allowing either of these animals into my food storeroom anymore. So, given that they were now relatively obedient to me, I made it known that they shouldn't be going in there. And after that, I did some cleanup, hauled all that muffalo fur out. I was thinking, as I sat down to do some research, that I could probably make some pretty decent clothes out of that. Get rid of this dead lady's clothes, even though she wasn't dead when I took it. As I laid down and stared up at the sky, and the dog ran right over my face because he has no respect for anybody. My snowman, still standing, still doing well. I was thinking about him as I was researching. He's kind of a companion. Maybe I'll name him Wilson. I will be sad when he goes, though. After that, I figured out my research. Got all I need to know about growing snow beets. Only to discover you can't plant snow beets in the winter. They just don't die in the winter. So that was a mite bit frustrating. But if I were to be here for another year, I'd have an option. So with a little bit of frustration, off I went to bed. It hadn't snowed in a few days. You could clearly see where the big fire had been. In the morning, it was back to the research bench. My power grid seemed to be doing just fine. It was nice to be off the grid. I felt fully self-sustaining at this point. If I just had a place to grow some good stuff. I decided to put some real time into cleaning up my place, inside and out. There was still vomit everywhere from when I made myself sick with my terrible meals, and animals were tracking filth around. As I was researching, more of my meals rotted away. Despite the cold, too much heat was leaching into that room. So as I was chucking horseshoes once again, I thought maybe I was going to have to do something about that before too long. I saw the dog run over, take a pee on the snowman, which I thought was kind of funny. Both the dog and the cougar seemed to be getting fed as they laid down that night. They were finding food somewhere in the wild. As I laid there, some fella came out with a gun. Crazy looking old fella with a crew cut. He was wielding that gun like he knew what was going on. I was fortunate. I was pretty sure my traps were going to keep me safe once again. And at that point, I decided not to even get out of bed. So he came running up, and his name was Will, and down he went. He had kind of a junky parka and pretty stupid pants, and I swear he was hitting on me the whole time. But he did seem pretty crazy. Definitely an older fella. In the end, I decided to dig him a grave and take his machine pistol. I also took his clothes off. He seemed a little happy about that part. As I was trying to deal with Will here, another fella showed up. Also had a machine pistol. Also had a creepy mustache. What is this world about? He wasn't too far away. I planned another grave, hoping that this guy'd go down to the traps as well, as I put Will's clothes away. I also decided not to go out and try and rebuild traps with this fella coming to kill me. I did just sit down and research. I only had that bow and Will's pistol, but I had no idea how to use it at this point. So he came running in, and down he went as well, leaving me yet another pistol. Turns out this was all a good thing, but the bad part is, I sure am sick of seeing people die. As I was rebuilding the traps, I noticed that the cougar and the dog were actually eating these people. So much so that when I tried to bury one of them, Hamlet started growling at me. And that gave me a right good idea. If these people are going to be this way, they're going to be horrible human beings, Why should I give them the benefit of a grave? So, I made a little spot behind my shed, out behind the wall, and I set their bodies there, made sure the animals knew where they were. Kind of solves a problem, and maybe other people will realize you mess around here, you get the business. So, at that point I started researching again, feeling good, but a little grossed out. Too many corpses laying around, I tell ya. And it was with that thought that I went to bed that night. Some loner passed through. She seemed like a happy sort. She also seemed like the type that wanted to start a lot of fires around. She was definitely a fighter, being that she had some stab scars on her. So I let her pass without incident. While I slept, spring had finally begun. And I got visited by one of them big, crazy, rare, mighty horned creatures. And a handful of other people walking through. It sure was a busy place for being so far out of the way. The visitors decided to come say hi. I decided to sell them a few things. And I bought some medicine and some components. And at that point, a bunch of my meat rotted away from the buffaloes I spent so much effort on. And I decided I wasn't going to wait another day. I was going to get this problem taken care of. We're going to put a proper freezer in here. So as the visitors left, I tore a hole in my wall, which was fine. It was cold enough outside now. And I just laid around doing a little sky watching, feeling pretty good for the minute. As I was trying to build that wall, I had a rabbit run in, try and eat one of my meals. I decided I was going to hunt that rabbit at some point. And then my cooler was done. I set it right down below freezing. And it was nice. Now I didn't have to worry about any of my meals going bad, any of my meat rotting. Things were good. I did a little more cooking, sat down and do some more research. That rabbit did step on one of my traps before I could hunt it, and I did have to rebuild that trap, but I got a little bit of rabbit meat and some fur out of the deal. That always means more cleaning, but what are you gonna do? Those two fellas outside were slowly being eaten by the dogs, but I wasn't looking over the wall. I didn't really want to know. As I slept that night, cargo pods came falling out of the sky, and lo and behold, they were full of oranges. They weren't too far away either. I was extremely stoked on that. After another fine week or so here, I was feeling decent again. So far I was secure and safe, and I had nothing to be upset about. Let's hope that continues.